Welcome to Mark My Words, a podcast that not only aims to inspire and teach the listener about entrepreneurship, it also aims to give my guests an opportunity to talk about their unique journey in entrepreneurship and life. So join me and my guests as we meet at the crossroads on Mark My Words. A wise man once said, the secret ingredients to success are in your blind spots. I found that under H. Jackson Calame's LinkedIn profile. Basically, the first line you see when you visit, I thought that was really wise in addition to everything else I've been listening to and reading up on my guest today. And he is the host of Vision Pros Live, which is a live podcast. And I told him he can jump in and tell me if I'm wrong or screw anything up. But he is also the CEO and founder of First Class Business, and he wants to help your business activate their full potential among many other things, which I see in his background. Welcome to Mark My Words, Jackson. How you doing today?
Mark, it's great to be here, man. I'm playing with the audience on this. If you get to see this podcast, you'll see like a ton of logos behind me. So, Mark, well done on the introduction and helping the audience see what's possible today. I love that quote, and I actually needed you to resurrect that for my mind. But yeah, our blind spots, man, it's what gets the best of us.
It really is. I mean, the moment I read that, I was like, that is genius. And that is so true. I mean, we feel like we see so much day to day, but sometimes you really have to step back and be like, whoa, okay, I can see X, Y, or Z that way. And those moments can be a real game changer. They can be a life changer. And I just thought that was brilliant. I'm like, this is gonna be a brilliant guest. So
Hmm.
welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate it a lot.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and I also appreciate you bringing up being able to see the podcast. I've been posting the audio pretty regularly. I've fallen a little behind on videos, so maybe this is the kick I need to get those videos up. So I don't know why you had any responsibility in that, other than just it looked pretty cool. So
Thank you.
but let's let's go into your path. I love looking at people's paths, and you might be surprised on what I bring up first
Ooh,
because
exciting.
yes, this might be about as exciting as I get, but let's. So I found it interesting that you went to college for Latin American studies, and I feel like that is an unusual one. I don't think I've seen that one on this show so far. What made you interested in Latin American studies, and what did that even entail?
First off, I am amazed at the depth of intricacy, but really your dedication towards truth. What do I mean by that, Mark? I have had other podcasters say, "Oh, you got your degree in Latin American studies." And no, 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 my profile is very clear. I studied Latin American studies, but I did not graduate. I had a 0.33 GPA in college. So why did I study it then? What does that mean? Well, I do speak Spanish fluently now. I served a mission in Uruguay. So I went to school, screwed it up, didn't know how to take advantage of university. I was just there to kind of keep myself safe before that mission. And I dated a lot. I got a 4.0 in dating and playing pool. Right. That was my life of college. Sports, pool, dating, done. And I went on that mission and came back and changed my major to Latin American Studies. Started to take school a little bit more serious, but I didn't have the finances. I didn't want to take loans out. I didn't have the money, and I didn't have rich parents, so I couldn't get a scholarship or a grant after 0.33 GPA. I kind of toast myself. So I knew I needed to get into business, though. Something happened in Uruguay that led me to know I need to get into business. And the when I got called to go to Uruguay, it was so clear that I was supposed to be there. And when I got there, everything from like Latino music, man, like you put Latino music on, I'm gonna start dancing. Like it just hits home for me. And Uruguay is my second home. I haven't been there in so long, but those people are still in my heart. We still stay connected. And yeah, I learned Spanish on the streets of Uruguay. And then I ended up my second marriage. Ended up marrying a wonderful woman from Mexico, and she only speaks Spanish. And so I learned all the modismos in Mexico, and I learned that whoa, Spanish is very different, in day-to-day Spanish compared to missionary Spanish. So that's been kind of a study from my life, and it led to launching opportunities for work for Latinos and beyond. But I work with predominantly Spanish speakers in my company as well, and spend probably, I don't know, 1 to 4 hours per day engaging in Spanish conversations, and still have a long way to go, Mark. I only know enough to be dangerous at how long I've been studying it, and I'll stop rambling on it. But yes, Latin American studies, that came from my experience in Uruguay that shaped the rest of my life.
That is really fascinating. I mean, first of all, for me, one of my biggest regrets in life is I took 5 years of German and not a day of Spanish. And I now have a job where it's, 95% in English and, doesn't require Spanish, but that little bit that I can't really deliver on is like, oh man, I wish that I would have taken a little more Spanish. And I feel like I'm picking it up a little bit
Yeah.
just from having to do what I do. But I mean, there's no way I could never have a conversation with anybody, or I, I, I don't know if I could use,
ChatGPT is your friend, Mark.
yes, or Rosetta Stone, but
Duolingo, Tandem,
yeah,
good
Duolingo's
stuff.
good. But I have to say, getting off of that, it's impressive when somebody works hard, they have a scholarship, they're 4.0 student GPA. Those things are impressive, but I'm also impressed with the fact that you had the life that you had, because for me, I sometimes I wish I would have been a little more fun when I
Mm,
was younger. Not that I was a total stick in the mud, but I was very serious. I'm like, I'm gonna
mm,
accomplish stuff. I'm gonna prove X, Y, and Z. And you chose a little more of a fun start to your adult life. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, it is,
yeah.
a 0.04 GPA or whatever you had. That is impressive. So,
It was impressive. It's hard to. What's funny is my international politics teacher. So one class I went to consistently. I loved that class, and I didn't turn in the midterm paper. And then at the end of the class, I didn't turn in the final paper, and I didn't go to the final exam. I just didn't go. I was like, nope, no way. I don't want to embarrass myself even any further than I already have. And so there's two things that happen. My last day of class with him, he looked at me and he said, Jackson, if you want to change a nation, educate a mom. And I was so moved by it. I didn't know if he knew that I had been raised by my mom and five older sisters, right? And they are all moms too, and they're fantastic moms. I don't know, but as soon as that hit me, man, it was like the universe stopped, and I was like, wow, that's I can see the power of that reality, and he gave me a C. He failed a lot of people, but he actually passed me, even though I didn't do any of the predominant paperwork that needed to be done for that. Like, I think he looked at what I had done to myself and said, I gotta help this kid out. He's got some potential, he's passionate, but man, he's really screwing up his school stuff. So there's that. I should have had a much worse GPA than a 0.33.
College professors are a little hard to figure out sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get a better grade than you expected, and it could have been because they saw your work ethic or who knows what. Sometimes you'll do worse and they're trying to like teach you something or
Yeah.
maybe bring your ego down. When I talk like that, I always think of my journalism class because I came into that thinking I'm a great writer. There's
Oh,
no
that's what
way
happened to me.
I'm not gonna get an A. And he kept giving my fake school reports like C's and D's and just critiquing my writing and it
It hurt.
with my ego. I'm like,
It
how can
did.
you do this?
Well, you took it better than me because I was in honors English as well and I loved to write. And so, man, she destroyed my first paper. And nobody had ever done that. I had always gotten excellent reviews. And then one of the kids, I remember him, they were critiquing my paper in front of the class, and he was probably a sophomore, junior, and and he goes, "Well, that's redundant." Oh man, the fire I could feel. I wanted to kill this kid. I was so angry and embarrassed. And again, where does that come from? My ego was through the roof. Right? And so I literally, after that moment, I went to probably 3 classes that semester. I was done. I just stopped. I just said, no, I'm not putting myself through this. And looking back on that experience now, knowing what I know and having built the career I've built, like that English teacher was getting ready to try to make me one of the best writers of all time. That's what she meant to do. That's what she was trying to do. But I was so soft and so sensitive and so ready to just, crumble due to my own insecurities that I didn't know that in those years. But it served me very well since then, for sure.
I think that's what my journalism teacher was trying to teach me because after a few papers, I was just like offended. I'm like, you know something? I'm dropping this class. And I actually wound up changing my minor. So that was my minor was journalism. I wound up with public administration, which has also served me pretty well. But I had the same experience or similar at least.
Yep.
So yeah, it teaches you, I think, in hindsight that you gotta stay true to what's in your heart and your gut and you can't take that criticism too much to heart. You gotta
People
try
aren't
to
out to get us. That's what it taught me. It's a real, and even if they are, they can't hurt me. They can't touch me. But we choose to see these lessons, right? It's a choice. We could easily blame her for the rest of our life and act like she's the reason why I had my bad grade. And if I didn't have such a bad teacher, one who wasn't so, caring enough, like we love to point the finger as human beings. But that's your choice, Mark. That's my choice. All right. We chose to see the other side of it. And, now I embrace that reality, knowing that anybody who comes at me with some type of critique or feedback, they care enough to open their mouth.
all about those blind spots, right?
Yes, it is.
So let's kind of carry on. I could keep talking about all that, but let's take it to the next step here. So after Uruguay, women, atrocious GPA, which apologize, but I suppose that would be the best way to put it. After
Well put.
all that fun and sports, don't forget that's
Oh no,
awesome
don't forget
too.
sports.
After all of that, I see, and I don't know if this is after or during, but You started off as an office assistant, drilling assistant. Where did you go once you were out of school? And what did you think and what exactly was going through your mind?
Oh my goodness, man. You're asking a visionary who lives in the future to think way back in the past. That's so funny. So office drilling assistant, what years does that say?
2004. Actually, drilling assistant is like 2000 to
Yeah, that's
06.
before.
Yeah.
That's before it, because that's I was like, well, I don't have that. I don't think I have that wrong on there, but yeah, my dad's in the oil field, and so growing up on oil rigs and changing tires that were larger than me, and putting fence posts in the ground in 115-degree heat, and doing all the things that getting screamed at and yelled at and cursed at, that you're the dumbest person on the planet, the whole 9 yards of being a what's called a roughneck. It's is an interesting, a lot of life lessons to learn there too. But after BYU, well, really, why I was there while I was at school, I met this girl, invited her, through Facebook Messenger, right? That was like the new thing back then. But I ended up inviting her over at like 7 in the morning after we talked all morning. She came over. She brought, of all movies, the movie Wall-E. She said I had to see it. I didn't understand it. Well, I didn't see most of it. We just made out. 7 in the morning. And she told me she wanted me to go to this like event thing. And for those of you who are network marketers, that's exactly where she took me, to some event to learn about this video phone thing. And I got into network marketing with my pseudo girlfriend, whatever our relationship was. And we I loved that it reminded me of the structure of what I had experienced on my mission. So when I'm talking about structure, there was district meetings, there was regional conferences, there was trainers. Your trainers were to teach you how to do things. Success Magazine, was involved in it. Like there was a subscription for that, and I really fell in love with the reality that the structure they had was similar to the structure I had on my mission, and I could buy into that. I could feel the power and value of that continual education. And so my new university became those CDs in the back of Success Magazine that Darren Hardy would do these podcast style interviews with John Maxwell and Jim Rohn and others. And man, I would eat those up and listen to those every single time they came out. I made in 6 months, I think I got a check for like $8.36. 6 months into that, having worked my tail off and spent all the money I had on my credit cards, trying to make that happen and do these tours. My mom kicks me out of the house because she's like, go get a real job. She's like, you cannot continue to do this. And she's, again, like the English teacher, trying to help her son, like, see a more practical path. All right. Trying to help me the best way she knew how. And I ended up Lifetime Fitness, first sales rep hired there that didn't have a degree. So I learned some tricks in network marketing of how to create influence and how to get things moving. All of those experiences of just tenacity and trying to find business owners who would take a chance on me, and learning how to how to see the business world from different angles. They all led me to have a foundation that has served me wildly and quite well in terms of helping entrepreneurs. But it is not the glorified path that the 4-hour work week makes it out to be. Tim Ferriss works far more than 4 hours, by the way.
I'm
He
sure.
posts on social media for 4 hours per day. Come on now. So so I like him and I like the concept, and I appreciate that the pros and cons, right? I've worked from home since 2010, Mark. Like I was there for my daughter's birth. I was there for she rolled over, I was there for it. She took her first steps, I was there for it. I took my breaks in the office. I got to be there with my children all the time. We had an amazing life, and but the pros and cons that while it's so easy to talk about and glorify all of the wonderful that exists there, I do worry now that COVID has hit, people are starting to experience that transformation and shift, but they're going to go through some of the same pains that I went through. Some of the things that can really ruin a marriage, for instance. What happens when you have two stay-at-home parents? You have two opinions about how things should be done or can be done. Right? One wants to be super dad, one wants to be super mom, but you both have different visuals on that. It can create new challenges. Or when you don't have a commute home, or your kids wonder, why does dad not come out of the office to see me and spend time with me? There are lots of little challenges that if you don't have a strong sense of self-awareness, or you're not willing to try to see the world from different perspectives, it can create a nightmare for your life. So I'll let you interject from there.
So, first of all, when you talked about your experience seeing Wally for the first time, I'm like, man, him and I are definitely polar opposites. My first time seeing that movie, I think was like 2008 off of some random, like, I think it was a website or a chat or something where there was a link and people were like streaming movies and shows and different like channels and just I think one channel was just streaming movies on a continuous loop, kind of like what we're used to on certain apps today.
Yeah.
And I was living in my little apartment in Virginia and just trying to scrape by at just out of college and when you just told that story, I'm like, man, oh man, that the polar sides of
Who makes out to Wally, by the way? So just to be clear, like I don't think anybody's ever had that experience before.
I'm sure if we looked long and hard enough, we could find a few others
Probably.
and then some. But I found that really fascinating. I also found what you said about remote work because even though this is not like my primary gig or source of income at this point, I still work in corporate America, but I've been working largely remote for the past like 3 years now. And a lot of those things you said resonated with me. And I always like, I didn't know what I was aspiring for exactly. I know I'm still pushing myself to get myself out there. I feel that drive to kind of like, I don't know if I want to say prove myself, but to definitely, you know, tell my story, I suppose, and to, have my own type of business that kind of like grows and all that. But I think ultimately one of my goals was to have the kind of life I have now, which is working from home and some of those experiences that you're having and or did have back then I can really relate to it, and I try to speak to it as much as I can for entrepreneurs. It's important,
Enjoy it.
especially if you're an aspiring entrepreneur,
Yeah.
not only to have something to relate to, but just to understand that it's not all just being at home and chilling and playing games or whatever, like life factors in. It can make things complicated. It can be nice because right now, for example, I'm taking care of my wife and I'm like right here to take
Yeah.
care of her as she's recovering from her surgery. Whereas if I were working in the office, like 100% of the time, that would really change things a lot. So it's I'm glad that you brought that up because it's important to understand not only the positives of it, but also how it can affect your life and how it can snowball into whatever you're trying to do.
Huge. So we have a opportunity, right, to be present, right, and enjoy the experiences that we can enjoy any experience. It's not easy to, right? Who was it that wrote the book, The Man's Search for Meaning? And he was he was a prisoner of war. and enjoying his game of golf in his head. And when he came home and actually played on the course, he shot a better score than he had ever shot before. Even though he hadn't actually played, he was just in his mind on that. And I don't know what that is like. I've never been a prisoner of war. But when, I hope for the people who are getting this experience of working from home, right, or living in a first world country, or having a family. Yeah, there's chaos, there's struggles, there's challenges. And can we appreciate what we have? Or do we take it for granted? Are we missing out on the opportunity to celebrate the good that does exist while also taking a healthy internal what it would taking in the reality that we're not bulletproof either, right? We have our challenges, and it's okay to not have, glory and fireworks all day long. Fireworks aren't meant to be all day long. They're meant to be a show at night and 15, 20 minutes, but the rest of life is normal. And that's okay. So I know that we took for granted a lot in our circumstances. We had such a great life, and it's okay. I have a great life again, but if I wish I hadn't looked at Instagram so often thinking the grass is greener, right? Looking at other circumstances and, oh, they get to go to the Bahamas. We only got to go to California. Like, why is that a problem? And when we do that comparison, it's really unfair to ourselves, rather than saying like, man, again, look what we have. We were an Instagram family. Probably have an Instagram family, right? But do we allow ourselves to accept and celebrate that, or do we suppress that? Each one of us has the opportunity to decide. And I would love to. I want to be surrounded by people in my life who are grateful, right? So I want to be somebody who's grateful.
And I do agree with you that that was a good problem to have, California versus the Bahamas. I mean, that's not bad. It's kind of like me being here in Florida. It's just like, wow,
Whew. Love Florida.
Yeah, I used to live in the north, like more like the mid-Atlantic, and I just moved down here a few years ago, and I mean, it's easy when you're living day to day, like it's just
Yeah,
same old thing, but you really take a step back, it's like, wow, 3 hours I can be at Miami Beach, two
yeah,
hours I can
that's awesome.
be at Disney World, et cetera, et cetera. I
Yeah,
mean, you know, it's you have to take a step back sometimes and
yeah,
just be like, okay, think about where I was a few years ago. I would need to get on a plane. I would need to drive for a day, and you're never gonna have it all. There's always gonna be something that you're not gonna have that you wish you had. And I think for as much as I like social media myself, that is a trap I won't say all of us, but many of us fall into where
yeah,
we see somebody else's life or, fill in the blank and we think, why don't we have X, Y, and Z? And you almost, it's almost like my approach to building up like my show. I always use this as an example now, but
good one.
I don't get too caught up in focusing on what X, Y, and Z people that I know are doing. The bottom line is how am I doing and what do
Yes.
I need to accomplish? What are my goals? And you can't get caught up in what everybody else is doing or what so and so is doing because it just leads to
Mark, I had such an unhealthy perspective for that for a long time. It was so toxic to myself, and I didn't know it. I couldn't see it, right? I was a blind spot. I was comparing myself to others and feeling like, man, how come my video only got 3 views if I was lucky? One of those was mine. Like me looking at it to see how many views I had. While so and so produces something that seems silly or ridiculous or manipulative, and it's got hundreds of millions of views, and that is not a healthy place to be. And early in my 30s, I finally had a real strong realization that I was competing with others versus just being willing to be my best self. And when I had that moment where I finally flipped that switch and realized, wow, I am now going to just focus on being my best self and being grateful and happy with that, knowing that I can't do any better than I just did. And tomorrow I can try again, and the next day I can try again, but I never have to worry about what others are doing, because as long as I did my best, I have every right to be happy with that. It's a huge transformation.
It is, and I think everything you said there, like it really says it all. I mean, especially the part of, okay, I'm making content that I feel is genuine and honest, and I'm just, I believe that I'm doing that, but I'm saying that just, as a generalization, but yet, you know, this shallow person or whoever is getting tons of views or tons of attention, and you it's hard. You can't really look at things like that and get bitter
Well, we don't
about
have time either, you
yeah.
know? We only got time for the good at this point. So if it's out there and it's doing that, may we learn from the virtues that the person may have, but also discipline our own vices and be grateful that if they have a vice that is super strong in their life, I guarantee you there's toxic realities they have to live with that I'm grateful I don't have to live with, right? I've got my own toxic vices. How do I work on those and stay focused again on me? It allows me to appreciate more the good, the bad, and the ugly that exists in the world, knowing that I get to learn from all of it. But you and me, man, we're producers. We're not consumers. We got to produce.
Well, let's kind of talk a little bit about the crossroads, because it looks like you, as you have explained and as we've talked about, there were a few jobs in the beginning after school. It kind of led you to the wheels spinning and you learning more.
Yeah.
When did you get to the point where you said, I want to start a business? Because your current business doesn't look like that was actually your first business. Looks like you had another one at least. And then how did you get into podcasting?
Hmm. That's funny. That's a full circle story. So I got married. We moved to Austin, and I had applied to work at Google, and I went through 5 interviews with Google, and they told me, "Hey, we really like you, but between the fact that you don't have your degree, and we can't justify taking you from selling $60 gym memberships to $230,000 accounts." And I said, why not? I was about to pee my pants, Mark. Like I was really close. Like this is a lot of money, but I said, why not? I knew what I needed to say to get the job. And they said, well, that's why we like you. But go get 6 months of enterprise sales experience and come back and I'll bring you on. So I went to Craigslist and I looked for an enterprise sales position and I found a startup and I went to this, it was an industrial warehouse, like a very meager one. And went into this group meeting, and this founder was in Pflugerville, Texas. I never heard of Pflugerville, and so I go in this little bitty warehouse in the middle of nowhere, and he's talking about, this was in 2010, right? And I had just been out of the country from 2007 until 2009. While I was gone, the president changed, the iPhone came out, or smartphones came out. The stimulus package came out, the recession hit. Like I knew nothing about any of that stuff. And so I go to this meeting and, he's talking about SEO, this thing called search engine optimization, and that, he's just applied to be part of something called Y Combinator. And I'm like, all this is over my head, and he's talking about websites and the importance of websites and newspapers and how Paul Buchheit, the inventor of Gmail, is part of Y Combinator, and Matt Cutts, the search director of Google, is part of it, and they founded that company or whatever. And so, all this is just like jumbled in my brain, and I'm listening. Like I know what Gmail is, and I know what Google is, so I'm starting to feel a little more comfortable. And they're like, so where our mission was to save freedom of the press, because what was happening is local newspapers were being put out of business by AOL and patch was what they called it back then. And when we lose local representation and newspapers, if they don't have revenues, they can't keep running, we will lose what's going on. We won't know what's happening. And so I loved the vision of that. I could see that. And then he's talking about how the same thing happened to Blockbuster with Netflix. And I could see that. And he said the same thing happened with the Yellow Pages, and online listings. And so I'm seeing these trends and I'm like, man, this is really smart stuff. I could see his passion. I needed this job, dude. I needed to get to Google. I just wanted the job for Google, but I'm starting to really like this guy's vision. So I go to this table to do a private interview. It was 2-on-1 instead of like the 18-on-1. And this guy that's interviewing with me, he's kind of showboating a lot, but then he's really weird and eccentric. Like I don't get a good vibe from him at all. And he's like, you guys should really launch a podcast and be in the podcasting world and blah, blah, blah. And I immediately make a mental block on all things podcasting. I'm like, no, I don't want to know anything about it. This guy's nuts. He's got no idea what he's talking about. So put a feather in that, or a pin in that for later. I got the job, and I go across the street and I sell a website and come back and I say, I sold a website. And they're like, you did what? I was like that. I thought I would start tomorrow or the next day or next week. No, I went right across the street, Brent's Tree Services. And so I came back and I said, do we have an agreement? Like that I can take over there. What's the next step to get them started? And he said, oh, we should probably have one of those, huh? And most people would have left and been like, this is crazy. Why would I work for a warehouse talking about a vision that's larger than life? I go sell a website. They have no infrastructure to support this whatsoever. And the only thing I can think is, oh, I can be really valuable here. I'll Google and find a template, right? I'll be able to create something and I'll really do well. Well, the VP of sales goes back with me and completely ruins the relationship. This Brent's Tree Services guy, Christian values, wholesome family. VP of sales immediately starts cussing for no reason, like trying to buddy rapport in the worst of ways. And I can see Brent's not happy. So he ruins my deal. And I'm walking out of that, and most people will be upset again. Like, oh man, this VP, nuh-uh. I know I got this guy's job in a matter of weeks. I'll be fine. He can go find a job somewhere else. But I was a bad leader. I had thoughts like that. Right? I was very aggressive. I was very excited to kind of pave my own path. Well, 5 months into that experience, they had tolerated me because of the amount of sales I could drive. But I'm now on that enterprise team working with these newspapers. I have no desire to go to Google. I'm in love with startups, like pitch decks and how we're doing this. I want to be a co-founder. And we have $537 in the bank account, Mark. And Lloyd lays everybody off. And so the next day I come back to work. And Lloyd's with the two executives who he gave the positions that I wanted. And they're planning the exit strategy. And he goes, what are you doing here? I just let you go. And I said, I'm going to my desk and I'm making my calls. And he said, no, you're not. I can't pay you. Go home. And I said, I don't care. I'm going to my desk and making my calls. I will close the newspapers. And he says, Jackson's crazy, whatever. He wants to work for free, and he leaves. And I go to my desk and I make my calls. I mean, in his defense, his baby was dying, right? He's been building this for almost 10 years, and it's all going to be for naught. And so I go to my desk and make my calls. To put it in perspective, we had 7 total newspapers working with us over his 10-year period, and over a 7-year period of building this up. I closed 21 newspapers that month. And it was a total of about $30,000, $35,000, and a 30 to 70 split with these newspapers that would sell websites on our behalf. And we would do a revenue split, but we would do the fulfillment on the digital processes. And that would allow newspapers to generate new income that they didn't have by selling traditional ads. And 2 weeks later, Paul Buchheit and Matt Cutts sent us $10 million. So we, obviously the company was saved, moved forward. I was listening to Alex Hormozi's book, $100 Million Offer, a couple years ago, and he talks about Lloyd and the newspaper industry and launched it. Like, holy crap, Alex Hermosi wrote about the first startup I worked for. This is pretty neat. So that startup led me on a path to want to become a co-founder. I eventually, a couple months later, became junior co-founder of a system called Blue Skies Hospitality Management Systems. We rebranded within 6 months to Restaurant Connect. We took on Open Table, and we had a dining room management software and reservation software that is world class, second to none. We ended up grinding out this bootstrap startup up to 36,000 recurring monthly revenues. Took us 3 years to get there. We would pick up furniture on the side of the road, Mark, and we would resell it on Craigslist just to make ends meet at times. Like, we were doing everything we could to make these things happen. We raised $100,000 through the Baylor Angel Network. We won that bid by a landslide. We did the software for the Masters Tournament, I guess, to all 7 restaurants, and had to put together an entirely new set of features to show the Masters Tournament that we really meant business and that we could provide great service at that level. Eventually, I ended up on the team at Video Power Marketing. Jake was put on stage by a digital marketer and called the YouTube ad expert of the world. And we ran some of the most viral video ad campaigns of all time at that startup. So the grueling process of learning all the intricacies of doing business the hard way then became combined with some of the most viral concepts of how do you really scale at fast and the right way with irresistible offers. And I learned a whole lot at Video Power Marketing about how to scale efficiently. But I learned before that how to create infrastructures that made sense, that could stabilize growth. And then ever since then, I've been working on how do I become the type of leader that attracts the right people to come and get involved in the equation so that you've got the infrastructure, the virality, and the type of people that you can really enjoy building with. So that's the short version.
The short version, my goodness, I feel like, we're getting short on time for this
Yes,
episode.
we
I
are.
feel like we could go another couple hours. You have
We
quite
could.
the story. One thing that I'll point out is that whole concept of I could really relate to your journey to trying to get into Google because I know for me I majored in television production and I had dreams of, man, I really want to get to this huge corporation, and I'm actually more or less at the place that I was really aspiring to get to. I try not to mention it in the episodes. We can talk about it when I hit
Yeah.
stop. But for years, going back to when I was in school, I was like, I want to intern there, couldn't make it happen, and just kept working and working. Had so many interviews with certain parts of the company. I wound up getting a job with this company in the most unexpected way, and it's been every bit as amazing as I thought it was going to be. But it took a long time, and it did teach me, even though this is a wonderful experience, that chasing after that is not necessarily what it's all about. And I don't want to be cliche, like, oh, it's about the journey. And I just feel like, you can still be happy and fulfilled. Like this, at this point, this podcast doesn't bring in a whole lot of revenue for me at this point, but
Mhm.
it's super fulfilling. And I mean, I feel like when I compare to some things that I've tried to aspire for or have done that should, especially some of the things I've done that
Yeah.
should have on the surface been really fulfilling and brought all those good warm feelings that we all want to feel, but it didn't. Yet
Yeah.
things that I'm doing that aren't necessarily like, I'm not living in a mansion off of my show or anything, but boy, is it ever fulfilling and
Yeah.
amazing. And, sometimes it's about more than just, accomplishing that goal or being a part of that thing. Sometimes it's more about what's it what's really making you happy?
If people want to call me Mr. Cliche, I'm happy to take the title. Enjoying the journey. I'm a big believer that if you can't find happiness now, you won't find happiness then. Happiness doesn't come from the external. The victories, you might end up being blessed with those types of victories, but I see a lot of people who get to that stage and feel absolutely empty. In fact, Johnny Manziel said recently in interviews, because he's learning to use the stage for his purposes, and I won't go into that, but he did say the loneliest day and the day he felt like he was just completely lost was the day he became the number one draft pick. That day he did not feel like he had made it somewhere, and I think that has a lot to do with the inability to understand the value of the journey itself and being present rather than constantly being focused on something that doesn't exist.
Like Johnny Football and Wally referenced in the same episode. I love it. And I feel like we didn't really even get to talk that much about the nuts and bolts of what you're doing today. So I
I
feel
disagree, Mark. I'd say that we talked only about the nuts and bolts, and that's where our perspectives, right?
fair
That's the
enough.
perspective of
Ah,
we didn't talk about anything that people want to hear, right? The accolades, the lottery winning, right? Of the experiences. Oh my gosh! And why do I do that? Because it is not the sexy that wins. It is me going to Google headquarters and sneaking in to two different security doors, literally passing those security doors without permission, knowing I might get arrested, and then finding at least one employee who comes out. I asked three in a row, two said no, and were not happy to see me sneak in the building. And I asked the third, hey, I'm here to turn in my resume for a sales position. Can you help me out? And that third person took compassion on me, went and got permission, pulled me in, and that's the only reason I got the interview, was because I did things that other people aren't willing to do in order to drive success. And that's what my path represents. Is it's not easy and it's not always sexy. But if you do the hard things for your life, then you will get the results that hard things achieve.
well, let me ask you to do an easy thing and tell
Yeah.
everybody how they can find you, work with you, listen to your podcasts, etc., etc.
Yeah, you're welcome to Google me, of course, and find me. You're welcome to reach out on Facebook as a friend. You're welcome to reach us on visionproslive.com. If you have a vision and you're looking to help others, it doesn't matter to me if you're like Lloyd in the beginning, right? In that warehouse without a whole lot of accolades behind you to drive your success, or, your, who did we mention? Or your Johnny Manziel. Maybe his vision has moved to a more pure position. I'd be happy to host somebody like that. As long as the leader is truly aligned with helping and serving others, come on my show. If you know that's not you, avoid me like the plague. You don't want me in your life. I want to be with people who are truly loving and helping others. And that's you. Come and join us.
Well, I'll tell you what, I am really glad that you joined me on this show today. It was a real pleasure to chat with
Yeah.
you, to hear your story, and I thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to be on Mark My Words.
Absolutely. I'm subscribed now, Mark. Appreciate you, man.
Right back at you. So, this was Jackson Calame. He is the host of Vision Pros Live. He is also CEO and founder of First Class Business. One way or another, look this man up. He has a ton of wisdom and it's a real pleasure to chat with. And I could have done a 3 hour episode at least. So thanks again for being here. Thanks again for listening. I'm Mark Schmidt, and this was H. Jackson Callum. I will see you soon on Mark My Words. Bye for now. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy day to listen to Mark My Words. If you would like to connect with me beyond the show, You can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt, where I will be talking about entrepreneurship, careers, and anything else that is on my mind. You can also connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at Nimrod1979 and Nimrod79 respectively. This podcast also has a page on Instagram at Mark My Words. And finally, if you want to leave me a voicemail or check out what I'm up to with the podcast, come find me at podpage.com/mark-my-words. Thanks again for listening, and I'll be back with a new episode soon. Bye for now.